The information provided on Terminal Addiction Podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. It is not intended as a substitute for professional medical or mental health advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician, licensed therapist, or other qualified provider with any questions you might have regarding medical or mental health condition. Never disregard professional advice or delay seeking it because of something you heard on this podcast. The views and opinions expressed by the guests, the hosts, are their own, and they do not necessarily reflect those of any affiliated organization or institutions. While we strive to provide accurate and up-to-date information, we make no guarantee regarding the completeness, reliability, or applicability of the content discussed. Listening to this podcast does not establish provider-patient relationship. If you're experiencing a medical emergency or mental health crisis, please contact emergency services or crisis line immediately.
All right, welcome back to another episode of Terminal Addiction. I am Doug H.
And I'm Paul B.
How you been, Paul?
You know what? I'm doing okay.
That's good.
Been hanging out with dogs for the last couple of days. It's been good.
Dogs are my favorite people, so we doing an episode today. We got a couple of topics that we wanted to talk about. Where do you want to start, Paul?
You know, one thing that's been in the news lately has been the Nick Reiner situation. I think that's an interesting place to start.
Yeah, it is. Really unfortunate what happened there. And I think what it did is again, shine the light on chemical dependency and mental health. So hopefully, a tragic incident like that, something good might come of it.
One of the things that really shocked me when I saw it was that by the age of 22, he had been to dozens of treatment centers. And so he had a real different outlook on what worked, what didn't work. And we're all going to have our own personal feelings about how that went. But, again, he had been through, he knew all the steps. He knew all the different, why he had the disease. But he had some mental health issues as well. And so, we're going to find out a lot more. And probably by the time this airs, it's going to be a lot more out about what really happened. But I think it really brings up the issue of chronic relapse.
Yeah, I know for me working in a treatment center, after patients have been there for, a couple days, couple weeks, month or so, a lot of times their chemical dependency, drug and alcohol symptoms really start to calm down. But you do see a spike in some mental health issues, be that bipolar, anxiety, depression, maybe their trauma really starts to come to the surface. And those are something that needs to be treated separately. I look at it like a Venn diagram. One circle is drugs and alcohol, and the other circle is mental health, and there is a bit of overlap. But it does need to be treated. And we talked, I think, in one of the previous episodes about how a lot of times mental health professionals don't want to go throw a new label or a new diagnosis on somebody super early because, it could be just protracted withdrawal. A lot of times it takes 6 months or a year for somebody to really clear out and for some of those other diagnoses, those other mental health things to become diagnosable. And I think that's a little bit more down your wheelhouse than mine.
So one of the things that I recently read, and I thought this was interesting, we think about detox and the couple days that it takes to get through the real acute stage. But some things that you may be addicted to, your withdrawal symptoms may last for a year. Withdrawal from even something like Suboxone can take over a year. So, dealing with those issues and then adding on the mental health issues sometimes is very, very muddy. And trying to find out where the person really lies. Is it primarily an addiction issue? Is it primarily a mental health issue? Is it what combination is it? It's not necessarily one or the other. It could be it can be both of those things.
Yeah, and I know working in a treatment center, the conversation comes up a lot with me and some of the other counselors. It's a chicken and the egg kind of a thing. Did the drugs and alcohol trigger something, or was there something that was already there that the drugs and alcohol made worse? Or when we take one thing away, a lot of times the mental health stuff starts to clear up. You quit drinking, and suddenly the depression gets better, but not always. You take away somebody who's been, a heavy stimulant user, and they just kind of live in that panic and paranoia, and that stuff starts to clear up, but sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes, and this is something we've been seeing more and more with the legalization of marijuana, is people getting tripped into like schizophrenia. And so you got a lot of things playing with each other and against each other sometimes, and it's really hard to make that accurate mental health diagnosis. And a lot of times we see so many people, Paul and I do, in early recovery, who don't really give it a fair shake. They never get out of that first 3, 6, 9, 12 months and really let a lot of this stuff settle in. They never really get to learn who they are aside from the drugs and alcohol. And I think it's really important that people make that commitment, because I know for me it took, 6 months for a lot of that stuff to settle down. The sleep is still irregular, the appetite's still irregular, the emotions are still all over the place, and it's just hard to it's hard to see sometimes the benefits of sobriety and recovery if you still have all this other stuff playing against you. And I think it's important for a lot of people, get in and work the steps if that's your thing. I highly recommend going to therapy or counseling. I think there's a lot of things that can be handled in a one-on-one setting that might not be the perfect place in a meeting or in a 12-step program. But we get clean and sober so that we can address a lot of this stuff. It doesn't just magically go away because we stop drinking and using. And I think that's a misconception for a lot of people is they quit drinking, they quit using, and they just don't feel better right away. And they don't give themselves the time to really let sobriety take hold. And they don't do any supplemental or auxiliary treatment for some other stuff that they have going on.
One of the things that I've seen recently, since the legalization of marijuana, and there are a lot of, we think of street drugs, okay, cocaine, heroin, all those things. And, we know about alcohol addiction, and we talk about those things. I just wrote this down as a note. But there are other things out there like kratom and the things that we get legally from our doctors. Doctors kill as many people as all those street drugs combined. Mm-hmm. Heroin, we all think of it as, well, it's a street drug. Well, where it started was with a little company called Bayer. Bayer created heroin after the Civil War, American Civil War. And they used it to help people that were addicted to morphine. They thought initially, for the first 30 years or so, they thought that heroin was absolutely safe. We were told the same thing about OxyContin many years later. But, just because it's been prescribed by a doctor doesn't mean that it's safe. We all remember Prince died and Michael Jackson died. Well, they both died from things that were legally administered to them by a doctor. So just because it's not a street drug as we tend to think of it, doesn't mean it's not addictive, doesn't mean that it's safe. And I was working in 1996 and we were just talking about this a little bit ago, when OxyContin first came out. And Purdue Pharma said that it was completely safe. And it wasn't until several years later that we realized, nope, it really isn't. So, we learn every day.
Yeah, and you bring up the heroin, Bayer connection, and then the OxyContin, Purdue Pharma, and it's one of those we didn't learn from history the first time, and so it's bound to repeat itself. And we're going through. I think we went through this back in, probably 2010. There was like the bath salts that were pretty prevalent, and I was unfortunate enough to get roped into that. And then there was stuff like Spice, the K2, and the legal synthetic marijuana, and that took a toll on people. We're seeing a real uptick in kratom. There was a synthetic, super concentrated version of that, which I think just got pulled off the market here, at least in Ohio, called 70H, and it was it's wreaking havoc. It's something that you could buy at the vape stores, at the gas station, at the head shops, and it was, it's hard to get off of. It's got a very opiate-like withdrawal. They use, Suboxone to treat some of those folks, but, it's the stuff that we see as legal or we're getting prescribed by a doctor. And so a lot of people just think, it can't be unsafe because it's coming from somebody in a lab coat. Things like benzodiazepines, the same thing. You get on, those kinds of medications and your tolerance goes up and you just need more and more of it to feel normal. My uncle was unfortunately a casualty of the opiate or the Oxycontin epidemic. And he was taking, really high doses. And I hear people talk about taking 300, 400 milligrams, per day of methadone or Oxycontin or Vicodin or Percocet or any of that kind of stuff. And just because it's coming in a little orange bottle and you're getting it at a pharmacy, it doesn't make it that much better. In fact, it could be worse because now we have, reasons or excuses as to why it's okay to keep doing what we're doing. And a lot of times with the pain medication, at least the opiates, the tolerance increases, and as the tolerance increases, your tolerance to pain goes down. So a lot of times people are taking something because they are actually in pain, not knowing that taking that pain medication is what's causing them to feel that excess of pain. We talked about breakthrough pain a little while ago, Paul and I, before we jumped on here. And so people don't want to feel bad. And I think that's one of the things that, alcohol or street drugs or prescription medication, people just don't like feeling bad. And we don't give ourselves enough time to really heal, or a lot of times people aren't eating right, or they're not exercising right, or they need to lose weight. And all those things play against you, and then you tack on some mental health stuff there as well, and it's just a recipe for addiction. And I know Paul worked, long time in hospitals and EMT, and I'm sure he's seen all sorts of stuff like that.
I'm going to throw a little trivia out there. So some of you will already know this, some of you may not. So human medications typically come in an amber bottle. The reason why they put them in an amber bottle is to protect them from light. And so whenever we see human medications, they're always in an amber bottle. Veterinary meds are not in an amber bottle. They're in a blue bottle. Same reason, so it protects them from light. But a lot of times there's no difference in the medications that your animals are getting. And I myself, and I think Doug knows some people too, that are taking their dog's meds because, well, it's easy to get. But, there's no difference between the human medication, the human version of it, and the veterinary version of it. So, something that you may not have known before.
Yeah, and working, again, in a treatment center, I hear all sorts of stories about people who are taking their animals' medication, be it like Xanax and stuff like that. Dogs get anxiety too, but, you see that blue bottle and you're having cravings, it calls out to a lot of people. And I think it's real important to make sure that you're disposing of medication properly. For addicts and alcoholics, I think it's always risky to keep stuff like that around, and hopefully you got somebody else in the house that might be able to be a little bit more responsible or be in charge of that, because I just don't need to know where that kind of stuff is. I was the kind of person that would walk into a friend or a stranger's house and go to the bathroom, and one of the first places I go is right to the medicine cabinet. Not anymore, thank goodness, but and it's just, what's in there. And that's just the little curious part of my disease, that's just wanting to know what's in there. And if I open that and I see something that I really don't need to be seeing, that just yells out to my disease, and maybe we could just have one. Maybe we could just, get away with it this time, and maybe we can just, maybe it'll be different this time. But again, if it's animal medication, prescriptions, street drugs, anything legal, alcohol like that, marijuana, I just got to make sure that I've got, a good program that I'm working so that I don't fall back into that chronic relapser, because there is just so much temptation out there. I'm a big fan of going to concerts and stuff, and I've always got to be on high alert. Luckily enough, I got some friends that I go with to shows, and so there's strength in numbers there. But monthly or at least a few times a year, I've got to make that decision in the moment to say no when somebody passes a joint or something like that. And it's just because I work, I think, a pretty decent recovery program, those kinds of things aren't as tempting as they were early on. And so I think a lot of times people in that first 6 months or a year, they're putting themselves in unnecessarily risky situations, going to concerts, going out to dinner, going out and hanging out with those old friends,
Going on cruises.
going and flying. There's airport bars, and so AA and NA and the treatment center that I work at, we just recommend that people don't put themselves in unnecessarily risky situations, especially early on. And early on might be different for everybody. Some people might need a couple of years before they really feel comfortable going into some of these places. I know people with years and decades who just don't go to concerts and they don't go to sporting events because their program for them just kind of dictates that they always on high alert, and they're not just willy-nilly putting themselves around things they don't need to be around.
And I think I brought this up before. I do travel a lot, and a matter of fact, next week I'm going to be heading on another cruise. But the first time I went on a cruise, I was white knuckling it because I remember those cruises where you have those unlimited drink packages, and as soon as you get on the cruise ship, there's somebody wanting to give you or sell you a mixed drink, one of those fancy Caribbean cocktails, and so I had real apprehension about it that first time. But as soon as I got on the cruise ship, I realized, there's an AA meeting on the cruise ship every day. This next cruise, I already know that it's at 3:30 every afternoon.
Nice.
So, I planned out my days so that every day at 3:30, I'm gonna be sitting in an AA meeting with a lot of other people who are in the same boat, where they're literally in the same boat. We're all trying to handle this recovery thing together, and we have our own challenges. My last cruise that I was on, it was mostly heroin and cocaine addicts that were in the meetings with me. But we still had some stories that were very similar stories.
Yeah, and I think it's great that you've immersed yourself in the recovery community on the boats, and I think that's awesome. You've made some good friends, made some good contacts, and it's just it allows us to do the things that we want to do while still prioritizing our recovery and our sobriety. And I don't know how many people are usually in those meetings, Paul.
It varied. Anywhere from 4 to the biggest meeting I was in had close to 25 people in it. So, cool. It really depends. Sometimes recovering addicts will come together. They're one of the groups that I'm still part of. They do a sober cruise twice a year. So they'll get 40, 50 people together from all over the country and go on these sober cruises. So it can really vary. A lot of the great meetings that I've had have been, 3, 4 people, and we just sit and talk for an hour, share our stories, share our struggles with traveling. Traveling's it brings its own stressors with it. Would I have tried it my first year? Absolutely not. Now, I didn't get on an airplane my first year. I was lucky to get into a grocery store by myself that first year. But as time went on, as the cravings went away, it became easier. But I still did have a lot of apprehension that first time I went.
Yeah, and one of the things that I have stumbled on, I go to a lot of concerts. I really enjoy the jam band scene. Your Grateful Dead, your Fish, Widespread Panic, stuff like that. And what I have found is there's a whole community of sober people that go to these shows. There's a lot of people, partying and drinking and using drugs at a lot of concerts. And somewhere along the way, and I'm still learning about kind of the background for this, but the yellow balloons, yellow tablecloth, if you're ever at a show, that's where sober people hang out. The Grateful Dead have a group called the Wharf Rats. Fish has a group called Fellowship with a PH. String Cheese Incident has a group called the Jellyfish. Widespread Panic has a group called the Gateway. And it's just really cool because I go to shows a lot, and I'll go and link up with people and talk about sobriety at the shows before the show. They usually have a little impromptu meeting at set break. And one of the cool things is if you're there and the people you're with are drinking and using, or you just don't feel like you're as safe as maybe you thought you were, using that yellow tablecloth, those yellow balloons, as sort of a beacon to go to. I know other bands like Spafford, Goose also have the yellow tablecloth. And it's just really cool because you get to talk to a lot of people who are doing the same kind of things we're doing, going to shows, traveling, following the bands around, but they're still, including and working their sobriety into, their vacations or their trips or their concert experiences. A lot of times they're handing out stickers at those shows. One of the catchphrases that I always like is one show at a time, a little play on the one day at a time. And so you'll see people walking around at concerts with just a yellow sticker on their shirt that says something like one show at a time, and it's just you give each other a little head nod. And it's really cool to be able to go out and do a lot of those things that I love doing. Paul and I got sober during COVID, and there just wasn't a whole lot going on. And so one of the things that I told myself was after COVID lifts, I wanted to go out and I wanted to do a lot of things. And whether it's going to hockey games or baseball games or concerts or museums or art galleries, I wanted to go and I wanted to live. Because for so long while I was drinking and using, I wasn't. It was more of a lifestyle than a life. And so I made a pact with myself to go and do these fun things. And I've got some really good friends. Paul and I have done a lot of things together. I've got some other friends that are supportive of my sobriety, of my recovery. I've got some friends that are in recovery that I go to shows with. And so we always at least make a pit stop over there if we see the yellow tablecloth and the yellow balloons, and just go say hi to people, see what their summer's been up to, or see what their concert schedule looks like, and just talk music and talk recovery. And it's just really cool to have that kind of integrated into going to shows, because it's something that I really love doing, but I want to make sure that I'm doing it safe. I don't want to, and I don't go to every show, as hard as that might be for some people to believe with the concert schedule that I keep. I don't go to every show, and if haven't been to a meeting in a while and I need to go to a meeting, or I'm just going by myself and something just doesn't feel right, I just don't go. So a lot of times it's making sure that I'm in a good place before I start putting myself in those risky positions. Always go to a meeting before, usually go to a meeting after the next day, let people know where I am, so that I'm not just out here floating around in the ether and left to my own devices. That's when I usually get in trouble. So people know where I am, and I'm okay with sharing, if I'm not in the right headspace to go. And so, being able to go to shows, being able to go on cruises, I know is something that Paul and I really enjoy, but also being able to weave our recovery into it is a really cool thing to be able to do.
So you might have heard a goal horn sound in the background. My team that's not been doing great this year, they won yesterday big time. They're winning right now. My football team is also doing well, celebrating those small successes. Back when I was using, that would have meant, let's chug another beer. Or for me, it was, let's have another glass of vodka. But today I'm able to, enjoy those things. I just got back in town, an hour ago, and I was very aware that the place that I was at had not just wine and beer, but they also had hard liquor, which was my thing. They're within arm's reach, and today it was easy for me to acknowledge that it was there and then just walk away. Early on, that would have been hard to do.
And I think one of the things that I have been very conscious and aware of is something that the Big Book talks about, and it's enlarging my spiritual condition. I'm in a better place these days. I don't hate me anymore. I respect myself, and I don't want to keep living the same life that I was. And so by enlarging my spiritual condition, and that can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people, I care about life more. I care about my sobriety. I care about the relationships in my life, and I really don't want to do anything to jeopardize those these days. When I was drinking and using, it was easy to not care, and now these days it's hard not to care, because I've got so much going for me. I've worked really hard to get where I'm at. I've got a great family. I've got great friends that are very supportive of what I do. and so my spiritual condition is better. Where I work, we talk about spirituality as relationships, and the most important relationship in my life is the relationship I have with myself, because the relationship that I have with myself dictates how every other relationship in my life goes. And the relationship I have with whatever the higher power is out there, but also the world around me. When I was out drinking and using, I didn't think very highly of myself. I wasn't surrounding myself with great people, and I looked at the world as a big, mean, ugly, scary place. And it's not so much like that anymore. I can still get caught up in a lot of the fear mongering that's going on. I'm not big up on the news and stuff because it's just a dangerous place for me to stick my head. So I really just try to stay. Some people call it a little bubble. But I'm happy where I am. I've got good friends. My family is supportive. They welcome me back, which I can't thank them enough for that. And I feel better, and I don't want to do anything these days that is going to jeopardize that. And so whether it's going to therapy, taking medication, eating better, trying to lose some of this weight and exercise, I'm conscious of that relationship I have with myself, and I'm trying to make it the best I can, because at that point, drugs and alcohol don't fit in the equation. The idea of taking a drink today is repulsive to me. It's just not on my radar. Those cravings still pop in from time to time, but I'm better able to cope with them, and I'm able to play that tape through and get to the good things that I have in my life today that I'm not willing to lose this time.
I think that brings up, and you touched on it a little bit about faith. I was reading recently a really unique perspective on faith. We have a faith that every morning the sun's going to come up. Is it something I control? No, it's not something I control. But am I pretty sure it's going to happen? Yeah, I'm pretty sure sun's going to come up every morning. I get up at usually 5 in the morning. By 7 o'clock, the sun's coming up. But I don't have to have control over it. And one of the hard lessons for me learning early on was I don't have to be the master at everything. I was used to, during my addiction, if something broke in the house, I didn't know if I knew how to fix it or not. I started fixing it. And I ended up creating more messes than I fixed probably in the end. But early on in recovery, I realized, I'm not the expert at everything. I can watch a YouTube video on how to do it, and some things I'm just going to look at and go, you know what? Let's call in the guy who's really the expert. Something else that I brought up yesterday. When you go hiking, you're hiking a brand new path that you've never been on before. Are you going to ask the guys that are standing next to you who've never been on the same path that you've been on before? Are you going to ask those guys that are coming out from that path, hey, is there a bridge out? How's the path ahead? Because, those guys that are standing next to you have the same clue that, they don't have a clue either. We're all at the same expert level. Let's ask the expert, the guy who's coming out.
Yeah, and I think that translates into recovery. I go to a meeting and I have a realistic expectation. I have faith that when I go to a meeting, there's going to be people there. I don't know who's going to be there, but I know that there will be people there that will be able to help me and like Paul was just talking about, guide me and tell me what's up ahead. And, I like the line in the big book, when anyone anywhere reaches out for help, I want the hand of AA always to be there. And for that, I am responsible. And there's a little bit of faith, I think, woven in there. I want people to be able to rely and depend and have faith that I'm going to be where I say I'm going to be, that I'm going to do what I say I'm going to do, that I have some character and integrity these days, and I've got some faith that other people will. I don't always put that faith in an individual person, but I believe that the program is going to be there. I believe that I got a really nice, close knit group of friends, and I've got faith that if I call 3 or 4 of them, somebody's going to pick up the phone, because they have in the past. They have proven that to me. The same way that Paul was talking about. I've got proof that the sun came up, yesterday, today, and it's probably going to come up tomorrow. So if I go somewhere, I really enjoy going to meetings out of town. It's a lot of fun. I get to go see how people conduct meetings, and I look at the little app. I look at their website, and it says they got a 7 o'clock meeting, and I show up at 6:45, and I've got faith that the program will be there. I don't know who's going to be there again, but I have faith that I'm going to be able to walk in, feel accepted, feel cared for, feel loved, and that I'll be able to be around my kind of people, in town, out of state, out of country, or on a boat. And I think that's really, really cool, that I can have faith in an entity that translates to having faith again in humanity. Because I think for so long, I was drinking and using because I was just so disconnected, and I didn't have that faith. And it doesn't have to be, for me, I'm not the most religious person in the world. Anybody that knows me will tell you that. But I try to come across, and I try to be a spiritual person. And I try to have faith, in humans and people and life and love and forgiveness and empathy and things like that. And I've got faith in that if I show that to the world will then in turn show that to me.
And I don't want to leave this episode without talking a little bit about gratitude. So, people who've ever attended one of the meetings that I go to know that we go around the room and everyone says something they're grateful for. And the last couple of weeks, almost an hour of that was spent on gratitudes. And that's okay. I have to look at every day and be thankful for not just the people around me that help keep me sober, but all those things that I get to do that help keep me sober as well.
Yeah, and I think gratitude, I remember, first coming around years and years ago, and somebody would bring up gratitude as a topic, and I would really roll my eyes because it was just another throwaway topic. But the older I get, the more, soberer I get, the more mature I get, if anybody can believe that, the more I appreciate when I hear gratitude brought up as a topic because, I got to remember to be grateful for things like food, like a vehicle, like a warm shower, a safe place to stay, consistent employment. But I've got to expand that, and I've got to be grateful for opportunities. This thing that Paul and I are doing here with the podcast, I'm grateful for that. We get to talk about some things here that we don't get to talk about at meetings or we don't get to talk about at work. So I'm really grateful for this opportunity, and I appreciate anybody that's been listening. I'm grateful for my friends that'll just send me a text message. You doing okay? Haven't heard from you in a while. I've got some home group members from a meeting I go to, and if they don't see me for a week or two, I start getting phone calls and text messages, and I'm grateful for that. It's not that people are hounding me or riding me; they're just checking on me because they care about me. I'm grateful for things like the seasons. I walk outside and it's January now when we're recording this, and I don't hate the cold. I don't look at it as a bad thing because I know here in about 3 months. There's going to be some green stuff popping up on the trees, and the snow will melt, and I'll be back outside and at a pool or on the water or at a concert. And so I can look ahead and be grateful for what I have now because, I know what's coming. So gratitude is a huge thing. And I really encourage people, if you hear that brought up at a meeting, don't roll your eyes at it. Give it some thought, give it some consideration. And dig a little bit deeper and share some of the things and the people and the opportunities that you're grateful for. I think it might have been a Garth Brooks song. I'm not a big Garth Brooks fan, but some of life's greatest things are unanswered prayers. And some of the things that I wanted that didn't come true or didn't happen, I'm grateful it didn't happen the way it didn't happen because, it made way for something bigger and better and more appropriate for me in my life and where I'm at. So, with that, Paul, I'm super grateful for you and getting to come over here and play with some dogs. So.
All right. Well, we will see you in a couple of weeks. Hopefully, I'll be right back from vacation and refreshed and ready to go. So we look forward to hearing from you guys. Please reach out to us. Let us know what you like, what you didn't like. Or I shouldn't say what you didn't like. What we could improve.
There we go.
There we go. What can we do a little differently? I used to do a lot of quality improvement stuff, and we always talked about opportunities for improvement. There's always opportunities for improvement. So, reach out to us, and we will see you in a couple weeks.
Yep. Anything you guys want to hear about, just get a hold of us, and we'll be happy to talk about some of that stuff here. But, Paul, have a great time on your trip, and we'll talk to you when you get back.
Thanks.
See you guys.
Bye. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect those of any affiliated organization. This content is for informational purposes only and is not intended for professional advice. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a friend. Until next time.